Today we're going to take a look at some of the exercises submitted by you, the people who actually want to know, asking whether or not these movements are worth doing or not. 1. Does the exercise actually train the body part or movement that you want to train? And if so, does it do it better than any other exercise? 2. Is it consistent and progressible? 3. Do you actually see people doing it in their own training? This is especially useful with arm wrestling, especially in the modern age of clickbait and flashy videos combined with the creative ideas of arm wrestlers who seem to be brimming with new and interesting methods constantly to eventually just rehash the same old movements. So on to the exercises submitted. From Phil Woody, one of the OGs of the sport, the Commando Pull-Up. This is a variation of a standard pull-up that puts the body parallel to the bar with a neutral but closer than normal grip with the hands staggered one ahead of the other. The main difference between these and regular pull-ups is that there is slightly more work placed on the arms, especially the brachialis and brachioradialis, since the grip is neutral. The back and surrounding muscles are all still working as it would in a standard neutral grip chin-up, but one side is going to be working slightly harder than the other depending on which side your head will move around the bar, and given this slightly offset position, the core is having to work harder to stabilize the body, which probably reduces the ability to swing and cheat, making it more work for the muscles involved. And with that offset loading, the exercise could potentially be seen as progression towards a single arm chin-up. So, to the criteria. Does the exercise actually train the body part or movement that you want to train, and if so, does it do it better than any other exercise? If your goal is to strengthen or hypertrophy the lats, upper back, serratus, core and elbow flexors, or strengthen the upper body in general, then yes, the Commando Pull-Up will do this just fine. Do other pull-up variations do it better? Not especially, since they're all very similar variations of the same thing. You could even argue that given the higher load on the arms and the ability to load one side more in each rep, they may be more useful for arm wrestlers. Is it consistent and progressible? Yes, just as much as any other chin-up or pull-up is. You can easily add weight and reps to the movement to progress in it over time. Do you actually see people doing it in their own training? Well, not as often as regular pull-ups or chin-ups, but that may be because arm wrestlers typically tend to do neutral grip chin-ups that require two parallel handles, whereas a Commando pull-up requires a single bar with enough room at either side to clear the head. So the option may not be as available, and the standard neutral grip chin-up does just as well. So to wrap up the Commando pull-up from Woody, I'd say it is absolutely a valuable exercise for arm wrestlers, although not much more so than the pull-up or chin-up in general. Next, from Leaf, the bench press and supination. The bench press is of course a classic exercise that everybody knows and almost everybody has probably done at some point in time. But is it especially beneficial for arm wrestling? Well, I'd say it could be, especially for people needing more brute force side pressure and hook type strengths, since those rely heavily on strong internal rotation at the shoulder, which is reinforced by the chest, lats and internal shoulder muscles that the bench press strengthens very well. So, if your goal is a stronger chest, shoulder, triceps or internal rotations, then yes, the bench press absolutely trains these. Are there other exercises that do the same thing? Yes, but the majority of them are variations of the bench press, or through inversion the push-up, or with a vertical torso dips. They all achieve similar goals very well, and whether or not those goals are useful to you as an arm wrestler depends on your specific needs, but having a generally stronger upper body is certainly not a weakness. One possible downside is the amount of strain the bench press could place on the shoulder joint, given the need for relatively heavy loads to make the exercise effective, and the potential for poor technique or general wear and tear type injuries, which of course would be an issue for pulling. So while it may be a good exercise, it's important, as we said before, to look critically at it and weigh up as many pros and cons as you can when deciding. Is it consistent and progressible? Yes, like most basic barbell exercises. You can add weight progressively and move through a clearly defined range of motion, assuming you don't cheat yourselves there. Do you actually see people doing it in their own training? Well, we have seen many people do the bench press in training, especially the heavier athletes and those who are able to recover from a lot more stimulus through exogenous supplementation. Is everyone doing it all the time? No, there are many top-level athletes who do not do the exercise. So it's really a personal choice and one you might need to experiment with to find out. And supination. I assume here you mean isolating supination as an exercise in the same way you can isolate pronation. First, we need to understand that supination is the responsibility of the bicep and the supinator muscle. Supination in this case is a dynamic movement rather than just the position of the arm. As you probably all know, it's the opposite of pronation, moving the palm from facing down to facing up. So you could isolate this movement just the same way that you isolate pronation, but reversed. However, since the majority of justifications I have heard for training supination seems to be in support of the hook movement, which is primarily wrist flexion, elbow flexion, internal rotation at the shoulder, and ideally pronation, supination seems less of a priority to train. In the hook, the rotation of the forearm is often such that the bicep is more involved, and we do know that supination is partly a function of the bicep, which we'd want to strengthen anyway. But could we not save time, be more productive, and potentially allow higher loading by simply strengthening supination alongside bicep-driven elbow flexion, aka regular curls? Or if we wanted more dynamic supination, we could do curls with active supination, maybe even with a belt or rope pulling from the bottom of the palms and forcing supination throughout the curl. Is it consistent and progressible? Yes, it could be if the exercise we use allows it, so there's no real problem there. Again, yes, I have seen a lot of people, especially hook-dominant pullers, training supination in some form or another, both statically through curls and dynamically with belts. You can also make a good case for it being important for elbow health, given the large amounts of pronation that the sport encourages. So it could be useful, but again, it's very individual. If you've had any success training the movement, then let us know in the comments so we have more data points to work with. Backwards Fitness asked to take a look at Travis's towel side pressure move. Here we start to get into the muddy waters where just movement and exercises for strength become a little messy. This exercise is clearly aimed to strengthen a tight hook, which depending on your definition could or could not be side pressure. Side pressure is quite a tricky movement to define since it really covers any movement from the middle of the table over to your winning side, which could depend on all types of different things. But if we can narrow this movement down to just being a hook exercise, we have something more specific to analyze against. So it is for all intents and purposes just the hook movement, but done with a more foreign tool to resist the hook, rather than just training on the table. With the position that the towel is wrapped around, specifically around the wrist from above and below, passing under the hand, meaning wrist flexion and pronation is not really being challenged much at all, so this movement is only really targeting elbow flexion and internal rotation. As we mentioned before, there are exercises that do a better job of isolating and strengthening those functions, bicep curls and the bench press or variations of these. If the case is that you need to learn how to perform the hook movement, you'd probably be much better off practicing it on the table with an opponent to learn as close to the ideal scenario as possible. Is it consistent and progressible? Well, no, it really isn't. At what point does the exercise begin or end? How do you add more or less resistance in any measurable way? Someone could pull heavier or lighter, but exactly how heavy are they pulling? Are they able to add only 5 kilograms more resistance? If you really wanted to do the same exercise but with a more consistent resistance, then you could replace the person either with a resistance band or a cable system connected to the towel, and you could just remove the towel entirely and switch to a handle to actually involve wrist flexion and possibly even pronation. This particular version, no, I have not seen elsewhere than here, but it is quite similar to the way Voivoda used to train in some videos, and I have seen a lot of people pulling against bands and cables in a similar way, but usually with handles. So Travis's specific version doesn't work that well as a long-term exercise, but with some modification, still holds some value. Mr. Peanut brought up an interesting exercise, and I quote, "This exercise is to improve your hit from the start. Tony Villa repurposed an old lawnmower engine to use a pull-start mechanism as a training device. After removing the engine from the lawnmower deck, he then rotated the engine 90 degrees and mounted it into the wall, with the starting handle slightly above the hand height when your elbow is on the table. Disable the spark and all done. Just push the table up to the wall when you want to use it. From a ready-go position, you are pulling like you're trying to start the engine. As you hit, the engine compression hits back. The compression provides a building resistance. Very ingenious, easily made, cheap, you just need to find an old mower. So I'm guessing that this setup gives a progressively increasing resistance as the string stretches out against the internal coil and possibly hits a hard stop at a certain point. In which case this is another exercise that needs to be looked at differently than the exercises done purely for strength or hypertrophy, since those are almost purely mechanical tension based, whereas this is more movement speed and coordination based. This exercise then is not actually training a specific body part, but is training a movement, so it's more like a drill you would see footballers do to work on specific skills rather than strength. and as a drill this seems a good one to work on an explosive start, but it could be reproduced more simply by just using resistance bands, which when set up correctly will give little resistance at the start, allowing you to start very explosively and then build tension as you move further, forcing you to keep pulling with more force rather than letting the initial momentum carry you throughout the movement. But is it consistent and progressible? Well, this is where the differences in types of movement begin to be exposed. If this were the same movement but done using a cable, then yes, weight could just be increased over time, but at some point the weight would increase to a level that speed and movement slow down and change. Whereas the intention of this is purely to move quickly and correctly, with weight being a very secondary concern. So as a strength movement, this doesn't really work, but as a practice drill, it could work very well. And if you did want to increase the resistance, you could do it more easily using resistance bands, although this is deviating from the lawnmower example. And if the lawnmower had a hard stop element which you would hit at a certain point, the movement would be similar to one we have seen Voivoda use briefly, which enters into the realm of isometric plyometrics, which are an overlooked part of training that I aim to cover at some point, hopefully. But essentially this would be a movement that allows a fast start and then hits the tendons with a hard crash into an isometric hold, which theoretically trains an ability to overcome resistance past the start, although the actuality of that is debatable. Obviously you, Mr. Peanut, have seen Tony Villa do it, and I've seen lots of very high-level athletes do the same thing with the resistance bands, and it's something I implement when getting closer to competition. So despite the slight inconvenience of disassembling and mounting a lawnmower on the wall, the movement itself seems theoretically good as long as you aren't expecting strength or size to be gained from it. And I'm going to have to wrap that one up for today. I have more exercises suggested, which you can see here on the screen, and I'll go over those in the next video. But if anybody has any more weird or novel exercises that they've seen or heard about, write them in the comments so I can check them out and give my opinion on their validity. That's it for today, and I'll see you next time.